Take your seats. We're going to get started. Linda's going to open the meeting with our prayer. Thank you.
Will we all please rise and bow your head? Dear Lord, because this month holds the Veterans Day and also the Marine Corps birthday, we are paying tribute to honor our veterans. Worthy men and women who gave their best when they were called upon to serve and protect their country. We respect them, we thank them, we honor them, we are proud of them. We pray that you will watch over these special people and bless them with peace and happiness. Jesus said, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life to one's friends. Today we pray for those men and women who have, in their military service, sacrificed their time, strength, ambition, health, and even their lives on this earth to benefit friends, known and unknown. Lord, as we are approaching Thanksgiving Day, we pray that our fellow citizens will remember those men and women in their prayers. We ask for the forgiveness of our sins and blessings to all those that believe. We truly live in the greatest country on earth, and we must always remember to give thanks to our Creator. Thank you, Lord. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will start our main program shortly after BCP business. We're looking for additional locations to put out 4x8 signs, our smaller signs, to promote the Berks County Patriots. Thanks to some of our members here, we have five signs out now, erected and with signs on them. We're looking for 7 more throughout Berks County, so if you have a location, know of anyone, or any leads, please let us know. We have a 50-50 raffle. You can still purchase the tickets. The raffle will be at the end. We also have a gun raffle. You have an opportunity to win a Henry Golden Boy. Golden Boy is like a Western rifle. It's one of the, Joe, what is it? The Lever Action. Sorry about that, Lever Action. Golden Boy, yes, thank you, Golden Boy. That or something equivalent or $400 cash. Now, folks, we do these raffles to help offset some of our costs. Our only source of income is what happens at these meetings and any donations, so we appreciate anything that you would do. Hey, quiet in the back. Folks, quiet in the back, thank you. General election. 2 weeks ago, it's over now. However, Berks County made history. The first Latino commissioner of Berks County was elected, Michael Rivera. Congratulations, Michael, he's not here. But also, the first Latino mayor of Reading was also elected, and that's Eddie Moran, and we want to thank, congratulate Eddie as well. Actually, Commissioner, someone told me, I'm not 100% sure, not only has a history in Berks County, but it could be the first Latino in Pennsylvania as well. Folks, personally, I was supporting candidates in Berks County, Montgomery County, Lehigh County, and Northampton County, as well as following the Superior Court judge races throughout Pennsylvania. Not all of my candidates won. Obviously, some lost. I'm sure maybe some of yours lost as well. I was disappointed in some of them that lost. Actually, I was surprised, two in particular. So, with that disappointment, what do I do? How do I behave? Well, before I tell you what I'm going to do, let me tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to whine. I'm not going to look for a safe space or seek professional help. I'm not going to blame the Russians. I'm not going to cover my face, dress in black, and throw urine on people that don't agree with me. And folks, I'm not going to move to Canada. And I'm not going to be a snowflake. So, what am I going to do? Well, folks, I'm going to accept the results of the election. I want to thank all of the candidates that ran. Folks, they sacrificed a lot. Their family, friends, events, time, money, for the opportunity to serve us. And half of them lost. So I thank all of them that ran. Also, I congratulate each and every one of the winners, even the ones I didn't support. I congratulate them, and I pray that they allow the Lord to show their way. I hope the rest of you do the same.
Sam,
Yes?
guess who walked in? A winner.
Oh!
Derek Weekman.
Hey, Eric Weekman, here from Berks County. I believe Eric had a record number of votes, like 44,000, Eric? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Helen. Question. Raise your hands if you want. How many of you know that our country is not a democracy? Interesting, interesting. Quite a few of you. I'm pleased with that, but we need to make this 100%. Let me just read this to you. Why we are a republic, not a democracy. Our founding fathers went to great lengths to ensure that we were a republic, not a democracy. In fact, the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, or any other of our founding documents. A few quotations expressed by the founders about democracy. In Federalist Paper number 10, James Madison wanted to prevent rule by majority, saying, quote, measures are too often decided not according to the rules of justice, the rights of the minority party, but by the force of an interested and overbearing majority, unquote. Am I cutting out? Good. Who said good? John Adams warned in a letter, quote, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There's never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide, unquote. Edmund Randall said that in tracing, let's switch microphone. Edmund Randall said, quote, that in tracing these evils to their origin, every man had found in the turbulence of follies of democracy. Then Chief Justice John Marshall observed, between a balanced republic and a democracy, the difference is like that between order and chaos. Now, the fathers expressed contempt for the tyranny of majority rule. And throughout our Constitution, they placed impediments to that tyranny. Two houses of Congress pose one obstacle to majority rule, that is, 51 senators can block the wishes of 435 representatives and 49 senators. The president can veto wishes of 535 members of Congress. It takes 2/3 of both houses of Congress to override a presidential veto. To change the Constitution requires a majority, requires not a majority, but a 2/3 vote of both houses. And if an amendment is approved, it requires ratification by 3/4 of the state legislators. And finally, this is one that's been talked about the last couple of years, very dangerous. Finally, electoral college is yet another measure that thwarts majority rule. It makes sure that the highly populated states today, namely 12 on the east and west coast, cannot run roughshod over the rest of the nation. That forces a presidential candidate to take into consideration the wishes of the other 38 states. There are some that will abolish that. That would be tyranny. Civics 101 on the same subject, very quickly. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic with democratically held elections. The difference, in a democracy, 51% of the people can take 100% of your rights. In a constitutional republic, the rights of all are equally protected. Freedom of choice is allowed in a constitutional republic. In a democracy, the mob rules. Too many papers, bear with me, folks. Okay, next, Berks County Patriots, we're having our election tonight. Let me see, Linda, you have one assignment. Give you one assignment. We're on it. Those of you that are up for, those of you that are nominees, please step forward. You're supposed to be on the stage back of me right now. Steve, are you able to free yourself? Okay.
I'm here. I have my duties here.
Okay. There's good reason for him being in the back. Okay. First of all, I want to acknowledge those that are not up for election but agreed to stay on the board. That's Linda Brankendorf. Judy Pelka, where are you? Get up here. Again, those that are not up for election but agree to stay on the board, Linda Brankendorf, Helen McMinn, Joe Phillips, and myself. Folks, let's give them a big round of applause. She's talking to herself. Now the nominees. Judy Pelka, step forward. You didn't say yes, permission. Judy Pelka, current events chair and treasurer. Stay there. Paul Brooker, current financial secretary. Tom Gross, current board member. New nominees. Sally Greta, step forward, please. Des Greta, thanks. Step forward, please. And we have Steve Kaczewski in the back. Now, folks, nominations are closed. The deadline was October 31st. The nominees were on our website. You had ample time to vet them. So, according to our bylaws, we have 9 board openings, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 back there, 6. And we have only 6 nominees. Therefore, per our bylaws, quote, should the number of board nominees be equal to or less than the board positions open, a ballot is not necessary. A hand, yes or no vote of all nominees is acceptable. So, do I have a motion from the floor to elect these 6 to the 2020 BCP board?
Yeah. Yes.
Who? I need a name.
Jim Bill.
Jim Billman. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Do I have a second? Okay. Shirley Moser. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion? Okay. All those in favor of these 6 being elected to the 2020 BCP board, please raise your hand. Those opposed, raise your hand. In the opinion of election chair, the ayes have it. Will be recorded as such. Folks, we really appreciate their dedication, that they're willing to work on the board. They could be doing a lot of other things. They could be fishing, they could be hunting, they could be shopping, who knows? But they're going to be helping all of us. Now, I want to tell you, we're working with the minimum board possible. We still need help. So even though you cannot be voted on the board like these were, we do have the authority that we can appoint board members as well as committee people. So I do hope that we have some of you others that will step up. So folks, let's give these folks a great big round of hand. Thank you and congratulations. Okay? I was going to have us, Judy give a speech for all, but she didn't want to do it. Let's see, who do we have? Eric. Where's Eric? Give you 1 minute. Come here. No, he's not getting your minute. No, you're guaranteed. Seconds to a minute. Matter of fact, actually, Jim Trump is here too. And who else did you say? Barry? Oh, Barry? Okay. All 3 of you can come up.
Okay, I'll start off. Jim takes his time getting up here. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all of you who voted for me, for supporting me. And I just want to tell you, this is living proof that signs don't win elections. Right? We won by 15,500 votes. We would consider that a landslide. And I remember being here last time. It was quite the entertaining debate, wasn't it? For those of you who were here? Absolutely. But I'm ready to do it again in 4 years. So those of you who have signs, keep them. We'll put them out in 4 years. We'll do this again. Daughter back there, 11th grade. She, a senior, I'm sorry, she just got the Alvernia letter saying she was accepted at Alvernia, so I'm going to be working for a long time. Going to be a nurse. But anyway, thank you very much. And the fellow row officers here, I look forward, you're going to have great representation in the next 4 years, but this was just a warm-up. I said this all the time. This is just a warm-up for the main event next year. I don't know if all of you saw it, but President Trump is coming to Hershey December 10th. He's going to be in Hershey December 10th, so you want to be there, show your support, make sure that we get him elected along with the Congress and everybody else, because we need them now more than ever. Thank you again.
I really want to say thank you so much. This was my last campaign.
Good.
I'm running. But I'm here for 4 more years. Okay? But it's the last. And I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate your support. It's my 9th term that I will be getting ready to start in January. So I look forward to it. I love going to work. I like working with the people. Most of them. Sure. I have to have lunch with them on a regular basis. It's really quite difficult. But other than that, it's fun. And I'm going to wrap it up in 4 years and retire. Thank you so much.
Well, hello, I'm Mary Kozak, and I, as of January 6th at 12:01 a.m., will be your new reporter of deeds. I thank you for your support. Y'all know it wasn't easy, but we did it, and we did it together. And there are not enough parts to thank you. And I promise you to do my best. I attended my very first commissioner in person as an
Berger usually comes to our meetings, and he brings the Lehigh Valley commentator. He's ill, obviously he's not here tonight. Hopefully he's going to be at one of our next meetings. Linda went and picked these up. Otto also is on the board of directors of Lehigh Valley Commentator. And like most print media, their subscriptions, their subscribers are down. So we're encouraging some of you to consider subscribing. It's a quarterly paper. It's $12 annually. It's mailed right to your house, includes postage and everything. A lot of good stuff is in here. We don't want to lose this. It goes to at least 3 counties. I know it's Berks County, Lebanon County, Lehigh County, could be another one in there, so we'd appreciate your support if you would. Also, there's a bill, H.R. 649, that it's a bipartisan bill that calls Communist China to account for its attacks on minority groups in Western China. There are reports that there are as many as 1 million in detention centers. I'm pleased to tell you that there are 100 co-sponsors to pass this bill, including my U.S. representative and many of yours, and that is Dan User. He's on this bill. I was in contact with him 2 days ago. He's in contact with the State Department, and he's going to keep us posted, but we want to get this bill passed. Also, I want to recognize we have oath keepers here tonight. We have Rudy, Sue's here, Charlie Gilbert, I think Chuck's here. Folks, I encourage you to support them. They were meeting, they changed their location. They are going to be meeting at Crossroads, is that correct? Okay. Might be more convenient, so stop by, see them. We try to support each other's groups. Sunday evening, 6 o'clock. Also, where's my insurance agents here? Ron Rothenberger, Ron, wait, something, jump up or down, anything. Okay, Ron is also one of our sponsors. Please stop and see him. And Eric said something about the 2020 election. I wasn't ready for it to get started yet, but it is. As a matter of fact, we have our first candidate here. I'm not allowing him to speak, so don't worry about it. But I do want to acknowledge him. John Emmis in the back, John Wade, okay? John is running for U.S. Representative, the 6th, is it, John? 6th, yeah. What? Yes. 6th, okay? Stop by, have a chat with him. You'll hear him speak next year, but he's our first candidate for 2020. I'm not sure what that really means.
That's good.
Okay. Folks, you're just about rid of me. My last thing, Christmas party, next month, honoring the vets. I gotta let you know, first of all, it is the 2nd Thursday of the month, not the 3rd Thursday. We move it up 1 week because of Christmas. So we encourage all of you to attend. Bring a vet in particular. Bring friends, relatives. We have tons of food. Everything that we have left over, all the food, will be donated to the Veterans Making a Difference. They were here quite a few times. Also, we always have wrapped gifts for the kids. We also have a lot of donated clothing and other canned goods. All of that will be given to them. There will be money, contribution as well from us. So we're going to have a nice evening. Many representatives will be here. It won't be a regular meeting as you see here. A lot of food and so forth. So please join us. But remember, it's the 2nd Thursday. Okay. I said I was just about done. Too many papers. Where'd you find them? On the front table? Okay, folks, someone's car key, I can't tell what it is. Toyota, okay. Sooner or later, you won't be able to leave the parking lot, then we'll have it, okay? Who's that? Someone? Mary! Mary, okay. Mary, Mary. Okay. Next up is Carol Gardecki. Carol will give us our Constitution Minute. We haven't seen her for a few months. I don't know where she's been. No, folks. No, we unfortunately scrubbed her a couple times. I hate to say that. Carol, have fun.
Sam kind of led into my talk tonight. He didn't know, but he did. He mentioned the Electoral College. How many of you know what the national popular vote is? Not so many. You better watch out for that. They're quietly trying to start that. The national popular vote works like this. When they count all the votes in the nation, whichever candidate got the most votes in the states that adopt this will get all their electoral votes, even if that state voted for the other candidate. If we had that in Pennsylvania, in the last election, Hillary would have got our votes, even though we voted for Trump. You gotta watch this. They're doing it kind of quietly. You don't hear much about it. You hear all about this business that they railroad Trump out of office and all that. Sometimes I think they're making all that noise so we don't pay attention to other stuff. This national popular vote thing will take effect when enough states enact it to make 270 votes. They already have enough states for 196 votes. They only need 74 more votes. Pennsylvania has 20. Every state in the union has had this bill introduced at one time or another. It has been introduced in Pennsylvania. They didn't act on it. I believe Judy Schwank happens to be one of the co-sponsors. And also Mr. Russo from Reading, Rossi from Reading. He's a co-sponsor. I don't know who all the others are. They have not made a move to adopt it in Pennsylvania. Now the problem is, a lot of people that are very, very conservative in every other way go for this because they think it's so simple. Why shouldn't the person with the most votes get the job? Why shouldn't they get our votes? Even people that should know better say that. The idea is you're going to have the states on the east and west coast always pick our president, as Sam mentioned. The idea behind the Electoral College is the same idea as the idea in Congress. You know, when our founders started this government, they wanted to have our representation by population. That's what the House of Representatives is. It's by population. The smaller states really, really did not like that because they thought the bigger states would just overrun them. And so they thought about it for quite a while in the Constitutional Convention. Finally, somebody came up with the idea of having two houses. One where the vote is by population, and the Senate, where every state got the same votes. Every state got 2 senators. The small states liked that. They felt like they were equally represented with the big states. That's the secret behind the Electoral College. The Electoral College adds up the representatives and the senators
from each state. That gives our smaller, less populous states a little bit of a fighting chance to overwhelm the big states. The big states still have a bit of advantage, but at least makes the playing field a little more average. So, don't let anybody talk you into the national popular vote. We don't want it. If you know people in other states that are thinking about it, talk to them, tell them you don't want this. You definitely don't want this. As I told you, if we had had that in the last election, Hillary would have got our votes, even though we voted for Trump. So don't let that happen to us. Fight against it and pay attention. Colorado had passed it. The citizens of Colorado got together and took petitions around and got enough people signing the petitions to get it on the ballot so that people could vote for it. I looked and looked. I could not find what the outcome was of that election. I don't know if the people still went for the national popular vote or if they voted it down. I was hunting for it for a couple hours today and I could not find it. So I don't know what happened in the last election, but they did have it on the ballot because the people took petitions around and got it there. So anyway, you don't always want the majority to win. It's called the tyranny of the majority. Sam also mentioned that. You know, there's a lot more poor people than rich people. If we just let the majority decide everything, the majority being the poor people, could vote all the money away from all the rich people. Think about it. That's not fair. They could do it, though, if you just did everything by majority. So, watch out for national popular vote. It's a bad thing.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. Welcome back. Up next, we have our feel-good minute. Sally Grepp, new 2020 board member. Hi, Sally.
Okay, does everybody know about the poppies that are sold by the VFWs? Everybody know how this came about? Okay, in April of 1915, a battle-weary Canadian soldier viewed the final resting place of thousands of young men who had fallen in the second battle in Belgium. Despondently, he contemplated the rows, hastily dug graves, each marked by a lonely white cross. In sudden revelation, he heard the singing of larks in the sky and admitted the grave he saw little gray patches of red, wild poppies, struggling through the battle-torn soil and through the clay mounds of the graves to bring the message of life among death. Inspired, Colonel John McCrae sat down and penned the 3 short verses excuse me, of his famous poem, In Flanders Fields. Published in the Punch magazine a few months later, the poem brought message of confidence to millions of people in the dark hours of World War I and established the Flanders poppy as the symbol of faith and hope in a war-torn world. Although Colonel McCrae never lived to see the end of World War I, his poem has survived in print and in the minds and hearts of generations to whom his personal battle was mere history. The poppies, which provide this inspiration, still bloom in Flanders Fields, but their message of hope has become reality through the Veterans of Foreign Wars Buddy Poppy. More than 13 million people each year purchase and wear VFW Buddy Poppy to renew their pledge to Colonel McCrae's fallen soldiers. Since the first nation-wide sale was conducted in 1922, nearly 500 million Buddy Poppies have been distributed and proudly worn by concerned Americans. The VFW Buddy Poppy is made by patients in veterans hospitals throughout the United States. The work provides needed therapy for hands and minds crippled by the ravages of war, and the pay earned provides a few simple luxuries to ease the boredom of hospital life. In keeping with its pledge to honor the dead by helping the living, the sale is conducted exclusively by volunteers, and the Veterans of Foreign Wars dedicates the profits to aid and assist of disabled and needy servicemen and veterans, and the widows and orphans of deceased veterans. Counseling service for disabled veterans, entertainment of hospital patients, assistance to servicemen, direct aid to needy families. All are provided in part by the sale of Buddy Poppies. After more than a half-century, the poppy still brings its message of hope to those who have borne the brunt of battle. The poem reads as follows. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row and row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead short days ago. We lived, we felt down, and saw sun glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders field. Take up your quarrel with the foe, to you from falling hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field. Colonel John McKay. I had a hard time deciding, should I do something for the veterans or should I do something for Thanksgiving? So I'm going to add a little thing here for everybody for Thanksgiving. Please be thankful for the family you have, for our military who is willing to protect us. And one last thought, get up next Thursday morning at 1 a.m. Set your scale back, your bathroom scale back 15 pounds, and go at that Thanksgiving dinner.
Fantastic advice. By the way, folks, I said earlier that we were looking for locations to put signs out to promote Berks County Patriots. I also said some of our members helped us get 5 signs. Well, I want to let you know that Sally and her husband were responsible for getting 2 of those 5 signs. So thank you guys again. Okay, folks, up next is one of the programs I look forward to all year. Love to see these young kids here and the dedication they have, particularly to our veterans. So rather than me saying more on this, I'm going to let Linda take it from here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet 2 outstanding teachers at the Schuylkill Valley Middle School. They are Christine Wysocki and Christina Miller. They had assigned a project to the 6th grade classes to write a letter to veterans. We don't often hear praises of our military in school anymore, and we're thrilled that these 2 teachers have enlightened their students. The Patriots are thankful that this project helps the students know how important our veterans are, and these students are our future leaders. So here are Christine and Christina to explain further.
We teach at Schuylkill Valley Middle School, and we have an activity where we had the children read an article entitled Reasons We Celebrate Veterans Day. So not only did they learn about the history of the holiday, but they used it to write letters of appreciation to you veterans to thank you for all the sacrifices that you made for all of us and our fellow Americans. The children who will be reading their letters to you this evening from my sections are for Sally Cruz Paradas, Nathan Kyer, and Ben Ostrowski.
And for my sections in 6th grade, I have McKenna Holden, Dakota Seidel, and Tristan Goda.
Dear veterans, our names are Ben, Nathan, and Priscilla. We are 6th grade students at Schuylkill Valley Middle School. Our group name is the Wysocki Warriors. In class, we read an article called The Reason We Celebrate Veterans Day, and we learned a lot about Veterans Day. We learned about the special holiday that celebrates people who have served America and sacrificed their lives to protect America.
November 11th is the date we celebrate because that was the date of the 1918 ceasefire that ended the Great War. We also learned that this year is our 100th anniversary, so happy anniversary. We are writing to you to show our appreciation. We thank you all for your sacrifice.
Ben has 2 grandfathers that served overseas. One was in Vietnam and one was in the Navy. He was a Morse code operator. He also has a cousin joining the Air Force. She is going to Michigan for boot camp so she can be a nurse in the Air Force.
Nathan's great-grandfather fought in World War II. Nathan's great-uncle fought in Vietnam.
I saw a video of a dad that was in the military goes to his daughter's basketball game dressed in her school mascot's costume. He surprised her, and she cried as she hugged him. We can't imagine having a family member away for such a long time. It is so nice to think we have people like you to protect our country. We hope this is your best Veterans Day ever.
Hello, we are the freedom fighters from Schuylkill Middle School. Our names are McKenna, Dakota, and Tristan. And we wanted to write to you because this is the 100th anniversary of Veterans Day. We want to thank you for your service.
We read articles in class called The Reasons We Celebrate Veterans Day. And we learned that it used to be called Armistice Day, and it's 100 years old. Also, the date had been chosen because it was 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, that the Allied nations and Germany called a ceasefire, or armistice, which ultimately ended World War I. U.S. officials now later changed it to Veterans Day like we know it now.
Thank you for sacrificing time with your family to serve our country and sacrificing or missing once-in-a-lifetime special events to serve our country. My great-grandfather served in World War II. He shot down planes and guarded them from their enemies. We really appreciate your service. You definitely made a positive change to our world. Also, Tristan's uncle served in Vietnam in the Air Force. War is tough, but so are you. You are one of the kindest people in the world. Life is a gift. Thank you for being there.
All you veterans, please raise your hand. The kids are going to pass out letters to you, okay?
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Schuylkill Valley. Thank you, teachers. It was fantastic. Thank you all. Folks, we have 14 gun raffle tickets left. If we sell them tonight, we can wrap them off tonight. Also, up next is Rod Miller. Rod is Berks County Patriots Legislative Chairman. Rod will not be on the 2020 board. Rod is the founding father. He's going to be missed, but we're not going to let him go too far. The only commitment I made for him is that we will not give him any assignments that require a deadline. So I'd like to welcome Rod to come up here for a couple minutes. Rod Miller, Berks County Patriots Legislative Chairman, and our last founding father.
Okay, good evening. I caught me short here. I typed myself some notes, but I didn't think I would be on tonight. I thought our agenda was full. But be that it may, The point I was making to myself, and I'll share, is very often the comment a lot of you folks out there is not on the board because really one person doesn't make that much of a difference. And I took it upon myself to document my own history to prove a point that one person can make a difference if they go about it. Just to run through a few things over the years in my, what, I got 5 minutes? 1968, I was, okay. I was working under contract to an instrument company, and the UAW moved in. The vice president of the company called me into the office and said that there are 3 choices. I quit, they fire me, or I join the UAW. Not very good choices. Well, I know the history of the Ruger brothers, Walter, Victor, and Roy. Don't have time to talk about it tonight, but all 3 studied their trade in Moscow. And Walter formed the UAW. Victor joined the National Council of Churches Social Justice Committee, and he was responsible for organizing those great vigors in California, for those who remember all the way back there. But anyway, they were not libertarian type people. I didn't want any part of it, but anyway, I made my choice. I left the company, so I guess the UAW was happily ever after. Right after that, I filed suit, federal government, contending my constitutional rights were being violated by being forced to belong to a union I could not support. And soon after that, I left the company, but I did join the state Right to Work Committee. I served for 37 years, but a fellow by the name of Beck picked up my lawsuit, and if you Google the Beck rule today, you'll find that that Beck rule, which eventually became the Janus ruling, whereby public employees are not forced to belong to a union if they so choose. I'm an advocate that we need the same thing for private industry. '69, I testified before the National Democrat platform hearings. They weren't kind enough to cordially invite me, but I was forced in by the organization, and I gave a talk on basically the subjects I just described. '70, I was a chief plaintiff, co-chief plaintiff on a lawsuit, Muhlenberg Township, whereby they built that building on a dump. And we went to court, we designed our own building in a different area, to prove our point. The judge at that time was Berks, who said he never presided over a citizen's lawsuit that was not so well prepared. But as it were, he had a heart attack, and Judge Hess took over the case, and he made us post a $250,000 bond if we were going to continue the case. And I couldn't see putting my house up for collateral for something I'm looking out for the interest of the public. So basically ended the case. But remember those days? It was during the gas shortage, long lines for the gas stations. I wrote Judge Hess a letter arguing that it was ludicrous to make us post a $250,000 bond. And I suggested in a letter to the editor in the paper that during the days of the gas shortage, everybody might want to go to the courthouse for their supply of Hess gas. Didn't sit very well with the judge, but I got my licks. I ran for township commissioner soon after that to expose the corruption. And my township has a reputation, Muhlenberg, of being the most corrupt government in the county, if you can believe that. moving along, Jasper Ho and I, Jasper's here tonight, we started a newspaper called Media Focus. And in that paper, each of us wrote a major article, the last issue. We couldn't get enough sponsors, but he wrote an article on the encroachment of the free market and teachers unions. And I wrote an article on the ludicrousness of the NAFTA agreement back in those days. Well, think about it. That was 94. President Trump, the disruptor, as I call him, he finally redid that NAFTA agreement, 44 years later? I was just a little ahead of my time. But the NAFTA agreement is now restructured. I took on the state treasurer, Republican state treasurer Barbara Hafer. I learned through connections in Pittsburgh news that Barbara Hafer was double dipping your tax money, charging for trips you would take. She charges in two accounts, her own account for campaign and her official account as state treasurer. I gave a talk, but the county chairman of the Republican Party at that time called me and asked me what I had to say. And I told him I was chairman of the 126th Republican district at the time. I said if he was at my meeting, he wouldn't have to ask me, he'd have known. He must have called Barbara, because Barbara Hafer sent me a letter and wrote me pretty good and told me he's going to sue me for besmirching her name. I wrote her a letter back, and I said, in your letter to me, you called me an amateur sleuth. I will, by the same token, sue you for insulting my name. Barbara Hafer was going to run for governor. And I told her the information I had was going to go to every county chairman in the state. Barbara Hafer, re-registered Democrat, never ran for governor. Solve that problem. I wrote a letter to every member. Well, I actually wrote the letter and sent it to the AGC, the Associated Builders and Contractors, the Open Shop Organization, that the Civic Center Committee was organizing to build a project labor agreement, to be built under a project labor agreement, meaning if you don't belong to a union, you can't work on it. Every craftsman in Berks County is going to pay taxes for that, but only the union members can work on it. I took exception to that. I wrote a letter. I sent it to the ABC. They called me back and said, what can we do? I said, well, I can get the list of every member of the Chamber of Commerce. And we got a bunch of kids. We ran many, many copies. And the kids, actually, the kids had some personal problems that they were, I don't think were confined, but they operated out of the, I guess, the same facility that these immigrants are now housing. And the letter listed every member of the committee that was going to build that building and how to reach them. We sent that letter to every member of the Berks Chamber of Commerce, taking exception to the PLA agreement. And thank you. The letter basically said, here's their name, here's their address, here's how you reach them. Let them know. They got hammered. Albie Boscow was the chairman of the committee. After it's all over, they pulled the project labor agreement. So I must have annoyed them, but I want another one. Okay. Sam Rohr was the first one. Ron Bolts is here tonight. He's carrying the mantra now for the property tax bill. Sam Rohr was the first one to write that bill. And after he wrote it, he and I talked, and I developed a proposed letter to go around the state, and also a letter to the editor to support the position, and that's over 10 years ago, so things can move slow. We're nowhere, we're a lot closer, I suppose, but Ron could probably tell you that story, but all of that was relative to sticking my 2 cents in to where people normally would like it better if I didn't. So, I carried signs at the state convention of the Republican Party that said, "More for governor." That same year, Tom Corbett ran for governor. They threw me out of the convention because I had this sign I was carrying. I was saying a word, but every time Corbett's name was mentioned, all these signs would pop up. So, did I get back out? It was coincidental, but I was asked by Frank Ryan to write an article for the Harrisburg paper on the movement of the Tea Parties. I wrote the article. I got Ed Bender to go through it and pick up any mistakes I might have made, and we cleaned it up. So, the day after the state convention, the first page on the editorial section was a tea kettle, a picture of Ed and myself, and a full-page article about tea parties. You had to go back several pages to find out what the Republicans doing that day. So, again, one up on them. So, anchor babies. I wrote the resolution on anchor babies. And between myself and Judy and Don Clearby, put it around to 19 congressmen and the 2 senators. And all the resolutions said, would you support a bill, an amendment to the Constitution that would require one parent to be a U.S. citizen, putting an end to anchor babies? We got 3 responses. Our own congressman, after I called the Washington office, finally did respond favorably. I met with him up in his popular office not too much before that. Anyway, Houlihan, which I think is the candidate of the incumbent of the 6th, I believe that candidate tonight is running against him. Houlihan sent me a letter back, said, I'm not the congressman, go see him. If I had the time, we would have got a letter back. That's her paychecks from the state to the national treasury. That's my money. So in effect, she's my congresswoman, whether she knows it or not. But that's the attitude they have. So out of 19 congressmen and 2 senators, I got 3 responses. We've lost our government, folks. They're actually oblivious to what's going on from our point of view, and I just about had it. Now, why do I tell you all this? I'm trying to point out something here. You got to do your homework. I'm in my 50th year. The first 40 years was before the Patriots. But if you put your mind to it, you can get their attention. Things can happen. And there are accomplishments that were made, and there are things I failed with. You folks keep thinking, what's one person going to do? I'm trying to tell you, one person can do something. So anybody out there that has that attitude, change it. And as Sam said, we need some people on the board. I would encourage you to step up to the plate. And let Sam know that you don't know what you can do, but you can put yourself available if there's something that needs to be done. So I close with this. I go back to I was watching my computer screen one day. Rodney Dangerfield was on. And Rodney Dangerfield he's one-for-one-liners. They often kid me. They call me Rodney Dangerfield because I throw my perks around to my friends every now and then, and sometimes I stay hard. But anyway, as I was watching that, part of it was his own personal life story. And he said, I turned 80. He said, only 10% of the people ever get beyond their talking to me. So, anyway, aside from that, I think of General MacArthur when Harry Truman fired him, and he had spoke before Congress. And his line was, to paraphrase him, "Old Patriots never die. They just fade away." And I'm fading away. And thank you much, folks, but it's a good 10-year ride. Thank you.
Folks, we're not going to let Rod, as I said, fade too far. He's still going to be part of the Berks County Patriots. As I said, because of various situations, we're just not going to give him any tasks that require a deadline. So we're going to let him work at his own pace when he's able to. Okay. Next, yes.
Embarrassing. I got to tell you one story.
I told you.
I'm Muhlenberg Township. Muhlenberg Township is the most corrupt township government in the county. I met with federal FBI agent Neeson. I gave him the rundown. I then called Meehan, who at that time was a federal attorney, later became a congressman. I laid it all out. I ran against him. I was assaulted by the chairman of the commissioners at the polls when I was campaigning for John Fielding at the time. They did not want me near them. Anyway, till I was done with the FBI and Neeson, the end result was the manager, who was concerned there was going to be a forensic audit of the books because he was cooking them, he was doing sole source contracts against the law. The solicitor was being nailed for what he pulled over at the airport. He had to wear a wire to catch the chairman of the commissioners. The best they did for it, the break they gave him was he lost his license to practice law. So 2 down. I didn't even get elected. The third guy, Commissioner Garris, he went to federal prison. I cleaned the house and never got elected. The best thing could have happened. I didn't have to go to meetings. We still have problems, though. We have the last manager took 3 weeks to go over to Eastern Europe for Ramadan. He came back, never showed up for work. He resigned the same day. I know why. And the township manager, the township commissioners knows why, but they won't let it out. But I have ways, so it continues. We now have a new solicitor that is being sued by Rawa for funneling work into his own company. It never quits in Muhlenberg Township. It just goes forever. Thank you.
Thank you again, Rob. Folks, I've just been told that we sold our last gun raffle ticket, so we will have the gun raffle at the end. Okay, up next, Attorney Joshua Prince. I've been looking forward to hearing him speak for, almost, well, I guess, over a year. I'm going to only read part of his bio. Let's see. First of all, Joshua Prince will update us on the important issues of the day. Joshua is a very rights-oriented and as such has focused his practice on firearms law and has become the chief counsel of the Firearms Industry Consulting Group, a division of civil rights defense firm, where he has represented more than 2,000 individuals, 300 federal firearm licensees, and several dozen gun clubs ranges on various state and federal issues. He understands the need for a dedicated firearms lawyer who will ensure that the state and federal rights to keep and bear arms will not be infringed. Joshua also has his own law firm, civil rights defense firm PC. Folks, Joshua is our #1 defender and crusader of our Second Amendment rights, as well as other rights. He fighting for us not only in the state, but also on the federal level. Joshua was going to be here last March. The day before, I get a call, says, Sam, I can't make it tomorrow. DC wants me. Well, hey, DC's more important. He won. I hope you were successful. Also, folks, a lot of what Joshua does is pro bono. And you might want to consider going on his website, maybe making a donation. I know some of us here have, but consider that. Now, I asked Josh to speak on whatever he thinks we should know and that we could possibly help him in different areas. I also asked him to make a couple comments on the recent election as far as the ballot question, the Marcy's Law, the one that most people at a glance would look at it and think maybe a yes vote is the proper vote, and yet a yes vote, not realizing it, among other things, you were giving away rights. So folks, let's all welcome a big hand for Attorney Joshua Prince.
Thanks, Sam. Good evening. Distinct honor and privilege to be here again in front of all of you Patriots. As Sam said, he did ask me to address some issues beyond simply the Second Amendment and some of the firearms law issues that you should be aware of. So I'm going to start out talking about Marcy's Law as well as a decision that came down from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just yesterday, perfect timing for our purposes. So before I do that, though, I do need to advise you of something, and this really pains me to have to tell everyone this, that what we discussed tonight is the law tonight. Tomorrow, it may no longer be the case. So anytime you do have a legal issue, whether it be in relation to a firearm or other issue, make sure you always reach out to competent counsel to advise you on the specific issues that you're confronting. So let's talk a little bit about Marcy's Law. I don't know how many of you saw, we had written, I guess, 2 or 3 blog articles about Marcy's Law before the ballot question was on the ballot. And Marcy's Law is very concerning to me. If you read it, a lot of people think, well, why would I vote against it? It's all about victims' rights. You would have to be a really bad person to vote against protecting a victim, right? Well, that's the terms they couched it in because they didn't want you to really know what it was truly about. And for some of you, I can simply tell you that Marcy's Law started in 2008 in California, and you will all already know everything you need to know about Marcy's Law. Now, it's being pushed across the United States, and this last election cycle, there was a question on the ballot as to whether we should enact, in essence, what is Marcy's Law. The problem is that what was on the ballot only listed 8 new rights that were being established by this law, when in fact there were actually 15 new rights, and rights that conflict directly with our constitutional agreement. In fact, one of the major issues with Marcy's Law is the fact that it would preclude a defendant from being able to seek any form of discovery against a victim. So a putative victim, and I know everyone here is aware of some of the situations we've seen in recent past, whether it's the Duke lacrosse team where there were allegations by someone who truly was not a victim by any of the Duke lacrosse players, as well as I'm sure it's fresh in everyone's memory what happened to now Justice Kavanaugh with all the fake accusations that were levied against him. But what I'm saying is not always is the individual that comes forth that says they are a victim an actual victim. So you have this proposal whereby the victim would basically be able to preclude the defendant from getting even exculpatory evidence. So the victim can have evidence that would exonerate the defendant, show that that person is not guilty, and the victim would be able to preclude disclosure of that information to the defendant. Now think about that for a minute. What it would also do is we would assume that there is a victim. Now I've already talked about that and the fact that in some of these cases, unfortunately, there isn't actually even a victim. But we're going to first assume there is a victim. We're second going to assume that a crime occurred. And third, we're going to assume that the defendant committed the crime. Now, last I checked, an individual was innocent until proven guilty. Marcy's Law wants to turn that on its head. Beyond that, it wants to establish other certain protective rights for victims. In fact, a right to an expedited decision by the courts. So now what happens when you have a criminal defendant who needs additional time to prepare a defense, and the victim saying, no, I oppose any continuances because I have a right to get this expeditiously decided? How does that work out? Guess what? Marcy's Law doesn't talk about that. So now we would have two constitutional rights that are competing against one another, and I guess we'll just leave it up to the courts to figure it out. Now, again, we have a number of articles on our blog about it, and for those who don't know, it's blog.princeslaw.com, where you can read all of our concerns that exist with regards to Marcy's Law. But the real quick of what occurred is that once Marcy's Law was determined to be placed on the ballot, and I don't always find myself, in fact, it's very infrequent that I find myself agreeing with the ACLU given their current positions, but ACLU actually filed a lawsuit against the Commonwealth trying to preclude the question being placed on the ballot. And the Commonwealth Court issued what I'll call a partial injunction. The injunction issued by the Commonwealth Court precluded the Secretary from tabulating and certifying the vote. Well, this caused a lot of confusion because there's a lot of news media that doesn't understand legal process, doesn't understand legal speak, and relayed to the public the fact that the ballot question was enjoined and is not going to be considered on the ballot. So we'd actually put out a blog article the day before the election saying, that's not actually the case. Although the Commonwealth Court has enjoined the basically counting of the votes relative to Marcy's Law, that could be unwound in the future, meaning you have to vote on Marcy's Law because that vote may later end up being tabulated and certified. Now, I think that's unlikely because the Commonwealth appealed immediately to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in an emergency action, and the PA Supreme Court came down and said, we're not overturning the injunction that the Commonwealth Court entered. But now, don't think everything is hunky-dory, because just because they did that, again, remember, it's still possible that as the Commonwealth Court now considers the case on the merits, the Commonwealth Court can change its mind and find when they file cross motions for summary judgment that, in essence, there aren't constitutional issues here. And that could be of great concern because, again, at that point in time, it could end up being that the vote is tabulated and is certified. Now, I think it's interesting because it actually touches on something that was being discussed earlier, and that's that we're a constitutional republic, right? Well, guess what? All it needs is 50.0000001% of the vote for Marcy's Law to go into effect. It seems to be more of a democracy in enacting a constitutional amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution than a constitutional republic to me. And I hope that if, God forbid, the PA Supreme Court eventually allows the tabulation and certification of the vote, that ACLU or other organizations raise issue with the vote count and the fact that it's not a supermajority, that a vote of 50.00001 in favor is a democracy and not sufficient here under our constitutional republic. But only time will tell, and I can tell you that although the Secretary of State is precluded from tabulating and certifying the vote count, the votes, because they're electronically cast, were still recorded, and guess what? If that vote ends up being tabulated and certified, Marcy's Law will be enacted here in Pennsylvania. Now, there's a lot of constitutional issues with Marcy's Law, and ACLU is challenging it on the procedural ways in which it was offered to us, the citizens, or we the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the ACLU at this point in time is not challenging the underlying constitutionality of the law itself. It's first it would need to be enacted before you you have standing to challenge the constitutionality of it. So I think even if the PA Supreme Court in the future finds that somehow, some way, the way in which Marcy's law was offered was not unconstitutional, there are still additional constitutional challenges that will be levied to it. But again, in my opinion, I think we will see the PA Supreme Court affirm that the way in which, under Pennsylvania's Constitution, that Marcy's law was proposed, it's unconstitutional. So you definitely want to keep track of it, and even if the PA Supreme Court does what I hope it will do, and I believe it will do, we all have to realize that they can offer it again, this time in compliance with whatever the PA Supreme Court requires and states. I think most disconcerting out of all of this was after we put out these blog articles about it and people actually started learning about it and contacting their representatives. Do you want to know what a number of the representatives were saying? They were blaming their constituents for not raising issue with them in advance when it was being considered by the General Assembly. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe the reason we elect our representatives and put them in that position is to advise us on the pending bills and proposals in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. And they also, in being elected and taking that position, take an oath not just under the Pennsylvania Constitution, but under the U.S. Constitution to uphold it. And yet now certain of the representatives are blaming their constituents for not advising them in advance of the constitutional concerns regarding these proposals. And this isn't the first time this happened. For any of those of you who know me, you'll remember about a year and a half ago, there was a proposal, House Bill 2060, which did all sorts of changes with regards to protection from Abuse Act orders and violates due process like never seen before. And I raised issue with it, and I continued to raise issue with it. None of the representatives wanted to hear it, and then it got enacted. And then people were basically taking up arms against House Bill 2060. They were extremely upset that their representatives let it get through. And what did the representatives say? Oh, well, we didn't know there were actually issues here with this. We didn't know the constitutional concerns. And as little as a year and a half later, they do the same thing. There's something wrong when our elected officials can't take the time to review the bills that are pending in front of them and that they're voting on. So I think I've talked probably enough about Marcy's Law. I think you know my position on Marcy's Law at this point, and I would just suggest to all of you that if Marcy's Law does come up for a vote again in the future, make sure you're informed. I honestly, if you believe that's right for the Commonwealth, then do your civic duty and vote in favor of it. But what I do believe you need to know is what the issues are. And it is unfortunate that in this day and age, so few individuals take their civic duty seriously and actually look into what these proposals actually do. I mean, our elected officials apparently can't be bothered to do it, so why should we, right? So let me tell you a little bit about the Supreme Court decision that came down yesterday, and this is from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. It was a case, Commonwealth versus Davis, and I'm not going to go into all the specifics of it. In fact, because of the limited time, I just want to really give you the main holding. The PA Supreme Court came down and said that the Commonwealth cannot force an individual to give a password to open a phone or a computer that may be encrypted. They said that's violative of the Fifth Amendment as well as the Pennsylvania Constitution. So that's been an issue that's been out for a while. In fact, the Superior Court, which is our first level of appellate court when dealing with criminal matters, had held that yes, the Commonwealth can force someone to disclose the password. And we have seen some federal courts that have likewise concluded that the U.S. government can force someone to have to give information so that they can unlock a phone, unlock a computer, or unlock a safe. So it would make that decision. And it's not the only recent extremely constitutional decision that we've seen come from the current makeup of the court. And I'll be honest with everyone here, concern a couple years back when the court flipped and became extremely Democratic heavy. I was very concerned about the decisions that we would see. And yet, what I've consistently seen out of the current makeup of the court is a real concern about constitutional rights. And that is so refreshing to me. A recent case I was involved in, I guess not too recent anymore, it's about a year and a half ago now that the court issued the decision. It was Commonwealth versus Hicks. It arose out of Lehigh County, out of actually Allentown. Unfortunately, Mr. Hicks was represented throughout it by the public defender's office that I won't even use the words to explain what type of job they did in the case. But it ended up before the PA Supreme Court. And the sole issue was, does it constitute reasonable suspicion of a crime merely based on the fact that someone is open or concealed carrying a firearm? So merely because police see a firearm, does that mean that there's a likelihood that a crime is being committed? Guess what? The Superior Court's been holding for years that that alone is enough. So me walking like I am right now, down the street, the Superior Court would say, yep, that's reasonable suspicion of a crime having occurred. And police can detain me. PA Supreme Court, I was retained by a number of organizations, Firearm Owners Against Crime, Firearms Policy Coalition, and I submitted an amicus brief. I think it was about 65 pages long. We actually looked to the case law across the United States. So we looked at all 50 states. We also looked at what the federal courts had done. And we broke it down for the PA Supreme Court, basically showing that even in New Jersey, they had held that it doesn't constitute reasonable suspicion merely because you see a firearm. Now, if New Jersey is going to hold that, I mean, really? Or are we really going to rule otherwise? So what was so refreshing was the decision that was issued. I don't remember the exact page count, but I think it was around a 50-page decision where the Pennsylvania Supreme Court adopted approximately 80% of the arguments we had made. And one of the main arguments I had made was that you can't stop someone who's driving a vehicle just to see if they have a driver's license or have proof of insurance. The fact that they're driving a vehicle in and of itself doesn't constitute any reasonable suspicion that they're driving it contrary to the law. And sure enough, PA Supreme Court put that in their decision. They said it's no different than the vehicle exception, or the case law regarding vehicle stops. And so I was really pleased with the decision that the court issued in Hicks. So if you have time, we do have information about the Hicks decision also on the blog. Pretty much all the things that I'm talking about tonight, with the exception of the decision from yesterday in Commonwealth versus Davis, we have up on the blog. So I know you want to hear about some of the different firearms law challenges that are pending, that we're dealing with, the issues that we see, maybe not just across Pennsylvania, but also nationally. So let me start with the one issue that probably a number of you have heard about. That's the city of Pittsburgh had passed a number of ordinances that involve firearms. So they passed an ordinance that basically prohibited what they defined to be high-capacity magazines. They passed an ordinance that prohibited what they called assault weapons. And they passed an ordinance that addressed what everyone knows of as red flag orders. It's more commonly known as extreme risk protection orders, but in normal parlance, most people know them as red flag orders. And so Firearms Owners Against Crime and Firearms Policy Coalition, as well as 3 individual plaintiffs, came together and we sued the city of Pittsburgh over their ordinances. And we immediately got those ordinances stayed pending a decision by the court. And Judge James of the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas ended up being assigned the case. And so we began litigating the matter. And we actually recently got a decision. But before I get to what the decision was, it was really interesting to me because it wasn't just the city of Pittsburgh fighting this now. No, now we had Bloomberg money getting involved. We had Everytown Law coming in to defend the city of Pittsburgh and their ordinances. At oral argument, they had 8 attorneys against little old me. During oral argument, their one lead attorney, I think he's their chief counsel at Everytown Law, Schuylkill, said to the judge, well, Your Honor, we've never lost a challenge in relation to a red flag order. And when it was my time, I said, Your Honor, they've never litigated a red flag order against me, and you never forget your first time. So, sure enough, about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, we got the decision from Judge James striking down all 3 ordinances in total. But it doesn't end there. Now, about a week and a half after Judge James issues the decision, I, through a contact I have, learned that the mayor, Mayor Peduto, as well as the county executive, Fitzgerald, were conspiring to go after Judge James and remove him from his position as a judge in Allegheny County because of the decision. They were actually going to file an ethics complaint against him to try and unseat him. And they were going to have a third party do it so they'd have plausible deniability. Yeah, that went over real well when I found out about it. So we put out a blog about it, and I understand that when they learned that we had found out, and the media found out about it, they brought in all the employees that were in their both offices and started interrogating them to try and figure out who let the information out. Thankfully, I understand that now that their plans have been foiled, they are not filing any type of complaint or taking any action against Judge James because they know what the outcome will be. Nevertheless, yesterday we found out they are now appealing the decision to the Commonwealth Court. So the fight will continue over something that's already been decided, in fact already decided by the PA Supreme Court in a case called Commonwealth v. Ortiz from about 20 plus years ago. And yet the taxpayers in Pittsburgh are having to pay for it, and organizations like Firearm Owners Against Crime, Firearms Policy Coalition are having to pay for it. This is the new battleground. This is the new way in which the anti-gun organizations are waging war against our Second Amendment rights. They are trying to bleed all Second Amendment organizations dry. And you got to remember, they're backed by Bloomberg. They have extremely deep pockets. So, with that, there's another preemption battle being fought, and that's against the city of Harrisburg. Now, who would think the city where our General Assembly meets would be a city which would violate the law? Yet they, too, have a number of illegal firearm ordinances. And Firearm Owners Against Crime and a couple individual plaintiffs, we brought suit. And initially, the trial court dismissed the complaint saying that we hadn't established standing. Basically, the court said, well, they can't show that they'll be harmed by these ordinances. They haven't been prosecuted. So my client should actually have to be arrested and charges filed against them to be able to say, hey, city, you're violating my rights. The Commonwealth Court, in what we call an en banc decision, meaning it's from the entire court, all the judges sign on to it, issued a decision saying, no, that's wrong. Someone doesn't need to be prosecuted in order to have their rights determined. And the Commonwealth Court reversed the trial court's decision. And yesterday, again, yesterday was a lucky day, we find out that the city of Harrisburg has what we call, they've appealed up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. It's called petitioning for a la carte because basically you have to ask permission of the PA Supreme Court to appeal the matter, and it is completely discretionary with the PA Supreme Court as to whether they will hear the matter. So we believe, based on some recent statements and footnotes, especially there was a footnote in Commonwealth versus Hicks, where the PA Supreme Court put in that, listen, in Pennsylvania, the only entity that can regulate firearms and ammunition is the General Assembly. Local municipalities cannot regulate firearms and ammunition. That it is unlikely, I believe, that the PA Supreme Court will hear their appeal. But it will likely be a minimum of 6 to 8 months before we know whether or not the court's going to hear that case. And then if they do decide to hear the case, then we'll have to brief all the issues. So why I'm telling you all this is that there's a bill currently pending in the General Assembly that I need your help with. It's House Bill 1066, HB 1066. That is a bill that would strengthen our preemption statute, that would specifically provide attorney's fees and costs where a municipality violates the preemption statute and requires an individual to go into court to get it struck down. Right now, that doesn't exist. And like I said before, we're fighting Bloomberg money. So if we have that, we can now force these municipalities to stop violating our rights, and if they will not, then go into court and have a right to attorney's fees and costs. I represented years ago 8 individuals up in Erie, PA. They were criminally charged for violating a city ordinance that precluded the carrying of firearms. We won all those cases, but guess what? They had no right to get their attorney's fees and costs back, even though the city was violating their rights. That's abhorrent. So I really need you guys all to contact your representatives and let them know that you want them to push through House Bill 1066. Now, it's not only at the state level that we see issues. Matter of fact, just a week and a half ago, I was before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the federal appellate court that covers Pennsylvania. There, I was addressing something called a Second Amendment as-applied challenge. And what that is a challenge under the Second Amendment where an individual believes, as applied to them, not everyone generally, just specific to that person, it would be unconstitutional to deny them their right to keep and bear arms. This case involves a young lady who 10 years ago made a bad decision. She made a false statement on a tax return. As a result of that false statement on a tax return, she is prohibited in perpetuity, meaning for the rest of her life, from ever being able to purchase or possess a firearm or ammunition. Now, I could be wrong, and I realize with the Common Core education of today, I very well may be. But I seem to remember in history class that we fought a little war over taxation, that our founding fathers refused to pay the tax. They took up arms against the king, and I don't believe any one of them thought they were prohibited from doing such. Yet, this is one of the battles we are waging currently. There was another case about, I think I argued about 4 weeks ago now, again in front of the Third Circuit. This involved an individual who had DUI, driving under the influence conviction, which prohibits him from ever being able to purchase or possess a firearm or ammunition. Now, I don't condone DUI, but there was no property damage done, no one was injured, and we're stripping him of a constitutional right for the remainder of his life. There seems to be something wrong there. The other thing that I think bears noting is it's very interesting to me that the only constitutional right that we ever strip of someone in perpetuity, with the exception of the death penalty for extremely egregious violations, is the Second Amendment. Could you imagine if you're convicted of a crime that moving forward you lose your Fourth Amendment rights? Now the police can just come into your home anytime and search it because you're a prior convict. don't we apply the same prohibitions that we have in relation to firearms to the media? Why should someone who's been involuntarily committed to a mental institution be able to be a news reporter? Or a congressman? There's a great idea. I mean, seriously, why should anyone who's been convicted of a crime punishable by more than 1 year be able to be a congressman or a news reporter? Could you imagine the outrage if someone proposed that? The media would be up in arms. You can't do this. Freedom of the press. What's the difference? It's truly a sad day that we have to litigate these issues. And it's not just here in Pennsylvania, it's across the United States. I'm also litigating, as some of you probably know, and I'm trying to watch time because I know they want me to give 15 minutes for questions. I love playing Stump the Chump, so make sure you're getting your questions ready. But I am litigating the bump stock issue, and we're currently waiting on the U.S. Supreme Court to make a decision as to whether they will hear the case. For those of you who don't know, basically there is an accessory that the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, had reviewed on no less than 12 occasions and found was just that, an accessory. Didn't do anything other than be an accessory. Then, after the abhorrent incident in Las Vegas, the Trump administration decided they were going to ban bump stocks. And Trump was very clear about it. Before they even proposed rulemaking, he said, I'm telling them to ban it. So, you know, I don't know what the rulemaking purpose was, because apparently it was by directive of the president, so they didn't even care what comments were submitted. More interestingly, information that was just disclosed within the past 3 months by ATF is now ATF has admitted that they have no information of a bump stock ever being used in a crime. Yeah, that's interesting. So anyway, after the rulemaking process that was really by fiat of President Trump, they banned bump stocks. They all of a sudden determined that these devices were machine guns in and of themselves. And because we have a ban on the making of new machine guns since 1986, they were all contraband. And so, even though you believe you lawfully bought them, and ATF told you when you bought them it was lawful, now you have no legal right in them. The government doesn't have to pay you a penny for them, and the government can come and take them from you. Oh yeah, and if you're found in possession of one, the government can prosecute you, where you're only looking at 10 years in jail and $250,000 in fines per violation, plus forfeiture of any vessel that they're found in. That's our government, folks. So we're waiting on the U.S. Supreme Court to decide whether they will hear our appeal. It's an administrative law issue, and I do believe we have a very high likelihood of the U.S. Supreme Court granting certiorari and hearing the case because of the unique issues that it presents and the fact that the court has signaled that it has an interest in limiting administrative agencies' power. I think it's very concerning that because we're talking about especially a criminal law where the courts are acknowledging it's vague, that it's not clear. And ATF previously, on 12 occasions, told us it doesn't constitute a machine gun. Now all of a sudden they're saying it does. Well, it would seem unconstitutional to me if we're now going to prosecute people based on a crime that even ATFs used to say didn't exist. And there's a theory in the law called the rule of lenity that basically says in a criminal proceeding where there is some sort of vagueness, and vagueness is a separate constitutional legal argument, but where there's some ambiguity or such in a criminal statute, it inures to the defendant's benefit. So if you could read it two ways, one way is the defendant didn't commit a crime, the other is the defendant committed a crime. Under the rule of lenity, we read it as the defendant didn't, and as well as doctrines that the court will be hopefully addressing in the near future. just know there's a lot of litigation out there pending. The U.S. Supreme Court is set, I believe it's December 6th, to hear argument in a case, it's called New York SRPA, NYSRPA. It's versus New York. It's New York State Pistol Rifle Association versus New York, and it involves whether New York's laws that regulate where to and from you can transport a firearm are constitutional. New York, seeing that it was going to lose, actually undid the law. They basically repealed it and then argued to the Supreme Court, oh, well, you should now just find that the case is moot because we no longer have the law. Because once the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear it, they saw the writing on the wall. Well, so far, the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, we think we're okay to still hear it. So on December 6th, the court will be hearing argument regarding whether it is moot. Quite honestly, I can't believe if there weren't enough votes to find that it's not moot, that the court would even hold oral argument. It wouldn't waste its time. So I don't think the court is likely to all of a sudden decide that the issue is moot. But we'll have to wait and see. And I do believe that we will likely see a very positive decision out of the U.S. Supreme Court in this regard that will give the lower courts some insight and direction as to how to apply the Second Amendment to various different types of legal challenges that are currently pending. So I'm very hopeful with that. So with that being said, I know it's getting late, and I want to give you all an opportunity to be able to ask any questions or that you may have. So who's got some questions ready to stump the chump? Yes, sir.
ATF, do you care to comment on are they anti-gun, pro-gun, or on our side or against gun?
So the question is about ATF and whether it is political in nature. Are they pro-gun? Are they anti-gun? What are my thoughts on that? So what's very interesting is ATF, like almost every other federal administrative agency, seems to really vary depending on the administration that is in office. So, for example, prior to Trump taking office, I can tell you that when I had a federal firearms licensee that was having their license revoked, I could not get a meeting with what's called the Director of Industry Operations to see if we could amicably resolve it. Since Trump took office, now that's the Director of Industry Operations is the same person. Now all of a sudden, in any matter where my client's federal firearms license is being revoked, now I can get a meeting. So it really does change. It was also interesting to me, I had won a Second Amendment as applied challenge right at the end of the Obama administration. It was a mental health challenge. I had an individual who was a Pennsylvania state trooper, was involuntarily committed while he was a trooper going through a divorce. He was cleared by the Pennsylvania State Police to go back on duty. Few people know this, but you can be a prohibited person in your private life and still be able to possess firearms and ammunition in your official capacity if you're serving the state or federal government. So he was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, as I would say, at least in the government's view, that he was perfectly good to have firearms when he's on duty, but as soon as he clocked out, no. So I won that case. I said there's no rational basis for this type of prohibition. The court agreed, and what was interesting is whether an appeal was going to be taken, the government filed what we call a protective appeal because they didn't know what the new administration would want them to do. And when the new administration got in, the new administration elected not to appeal the case, so they actually had to withdraw it. So all administrative agencies at the federal level do seem to vary or vacillate on their position on issues depending on the administration in office. Yes, sir.
This is going off on a tangent. You see on the internet that a lot of counties are declaring themselves to be a Second Amendment sanctuary county. What's the legality here with, say, Sheriff Eric Wade, it means he's the top law enforcement official in the county, if he would declare our county to be a Second Amendment sanctuary?
Well, Eric would not have the power just merely as sheriff to declare that. That would take the county commissioners to pass some sort of resolution or such like that, declaring it to be a Second Amendment sanctuary city. I haven't seen, or county, excuse me, I haven't seen any of them in Pennsylvania. Right now, there's a lot of talk about this going on down in Florida. It's very possible we may see it come to Pennsylvania. I would say there could potentially be some issues with our preemption statute. So to the same that I'm fighting cities like Pittsburgh in enacting draconian and any type of firearm regulations, they could assumingly attempt to argue, well, we can't also regulate pro-Second Amendment things either, that only the General Assembly could do it.
Yeah, with the Second Amendment in mind, how is any gun law legal?
That's a great question. And this is really an issue that is coming out in a number of the cases that we're litigating, because one of the questions becomes a historical analysis. And what did the founding fathers at the time of our founding believe? And there is historical support for individuals who were violent being precluded from having firearms. There's also some interesting information. There was a law that came about as a result of Shays' Rebellion, where they basically said that an individual who partake in Shays' Rebellion could later get their firearm rights back. I think it was after 3 years, and if they took an oath of allegiance. So there is some historical support for certain prohibitions, even at the time of founding, but generally those were only in relation to people who were violent. So again, if we're going to look at the historical context, I think that's where we have to start, see what our founding fathers believed was acceptable, and if we don't agree with that, then there is the amendment process. And I love everyone who says that the Constitution was intended to be a living, breathing document, because you only have to ask them one question, and they can't answer it. If our founding fathers intended for our Constitution to be a living, breathing document, then why'd they include an amendment process? You wouldn't need it. It would just simply evolve, right? There's a reason why we have an amendment process, and we've utilized it on a number of occasions. You know, it blows my mind that not that long ago in our history, we all understood that for the government to ban something that was not even mentioned in the Constitution, we had to go through the amendment process. 18th Amendment, prohibition, banning alcohol. Alcohol never appeared in the U.S. Constitution prior to it. It wasn't a constitutional right to drink alcohol. Yet, we the people understood that if the government wanted to ban something for all citizens, it had to go through the amendment process. And we likewise understood that after we enacted the 18th Amendment, that when we wanted to repeal it, we had to go through the amendment process again. And that's the 21st Amendment. So it really concerns me that in such a short period of time, we have come so far from what we used to understand to be true.
Hi, Josh. Could you just talk briefly about the HSEEP program and how they're using that in conjunction with local governments and the police to put on fake shootings at schools and then reporting it as real?
I'm not, Josh, excuse me 1 second. We want to get as many questions in as possible. You can just make your answers a little shorter. Okay? Okay, thanks.
I'm not familiar with that acronym, the HE, whatever you use.
Homeland Security, Evaluation, Exercise Program.
I am not that familiar with it, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I will say I do know that Homeland Security does do some mock drills in that, but at the present time, I don't have enough information to really give you a valid response, and I don't want to just BS it.
Josh, excuse me. Thanks for being here tonight, and thank you for
testifying before the Senate, PA Senate Judiciary Committee back September 25th. If you could just touch on your opening remarks to them regarding them senators being the first in the nation to subpoena certain drug companies to release studies on certain drugs.
So you really want to get me in trouble with Sam here, because he just told me to keep my responses short. Okay, so real short, make sure you go to blog.princelaw.com, because my testimony from September 25th is up there. And the long and short of it is, I did substantial research into what is causing across America the violence we are seeing. And I came to one major conclusion, that it results from SSRI drugs. Most of the drugs that are being prescribed for depression and anti-anxiety, ADHD. If you read the testimony I prepared, and I have support from all over, it's not like I just took one person's position statement and just relied on that. I have all different sources of support. It shows that the pharmaceutical industry is aware of this. The pharmaceutical industry is not disclosing it because they're not required to. And in fact, with the Drug Prozac, which I give an example of in my testimony, first time they submitted it, I believe, with 4 studies, FDA denied it. The second time they submitted, I believe, with 6 studies. The FDA denied it. On the third time, they submitted it with the same 6 studies, just repackaged the second application, and FDA approved it. What you'll learn is that a drug manufacturer could have 1 million bad studies and only 6 good studies, and they only have to submit those studies that they want. So they can know about those 1 million and just submit the 6 that support them. So definitely do some research. I can tell you that if I had someone that I loved, that I knew was about to be prescribed SSRI drugs or is on SSRI drugs, that I would have great concern.
This should be a pretty short answer. Could you clarify for me what the current status of the open carry in Pennsylvania is? There are a lot of opinions, and people are spreading a lot of information, some of which has to be false.
So the issue with open carry right now is the opioid crisis, and Governor Wolf issuing his proclamations of a state of emergency regarding it. And as a result, in order to open carry, you must have a license to carry firearms. If there is no state of emergency, one can arguably, I'll explain that in a second, see this wasn't a short answer, you can arguably open carry a firearm anywhere in the Commonwealth with the exception of Philadelphia in the absence of a license to carry. But we have some very draconian transportation laws that only allow you to go to and from very specific locations, like the New York case that the U.S. Supreme Court's hearing. And those you could end up violating if you don't have a license to carry firearms. If you have the license to carry firearms, you are exempt from the transportation laws. So I tell every client of mine, if you never want to conceal carry a firearm, I don't care, go out and get your license to carry. It's $20 for 5 years. It gives you so many protections under the law.
Hi Josh, thanks so much for everything that you do. Under 2060, and God forbid any future extreme risk laws passing that are as they're proposed today, would a gun trust give an accused person any protection in terms of being able to turn those firearms over to someone else in the trust versus the authorities?
It may, but it's going to come down to a judicial determination, because the other party is going to say that they know that the guns are there, that they're held in a trust, and then it comes down to a judge making a decision if the judge is going to allow that or not. I had a challenge in Montgomery County years ago regarding a PFA and a trust, and the judge said, look, this trust was enacted before the PFA. It does mention the possibility of a PFA and what's to happen there, so I'm going to let the trust continue to hold the firearms, but I'm also going to issue an order reminding the trustees that they swore an oath that they would not allow access to the firearms in the event the settler, the person who started the trust, became prohibited due to a PFA. But the judge could have arguably ruled the other way, and then it's up to you whether you want to litigate and spend all the money litigating those types of issues. This is the Gong Show. They're getting ready to give me the hook.
How is that going to work if a gun is willed to somebody? Not a trust, but willed.
And the person's under an extreme risk protection order? Is that what you...
Will.
So if a gun is just willed to someone, then as long as that person is not a prohibited person, it can be transferred to that individual. If they're a prohibited person, then we got to look to the will and see whether there's either a liquidation provision that says that basically the executrix is to liquidate and give the cash value, or whether it has a provision that says in the event the beneficiary is prohibited, they relinquish any right to the firearm. So, I believe with that, I am getting the gong.
Actually, Josh, we're going to keep you a little bit.
Oh boy.
Folks, he's fantastic, isn't he? Let's give him a big round of applause. Really loud and crazy there. Well worth it. Josh, we have 2 raffles. We'd like to have you pick the winners.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Everyone wants to shoot the lawyer, and now I get to pick the ticket, and everyone's going to be upset with the lawyer.
What is?
This is a 50-50. $130. Goes to the winner.
Oh. All right. The winning ticket is 52, 45, 24.
Anybody? Anybody? Read that again, Josh.
52, 45, 24. Woo! We got a winner! Bingo!
There. Stay there. Let me see it now.
Okay, now...
Check it. Is that it? How do you know? What? Here, is that? Check it. Fantastic, congratulations. Now hold on, now, this is for the gun raffle. You have a choice of either the Henry Golden Boy or something equivalent, or $400 cash, okay? Drum roll.
I got more than one. I got to put it back in. I'm sorry. Harry Shack.
Harry?
S-H-A-A-K.
Where is Harry? Here. Harry, come on out. Count to 3. If you're not up here, we'll give it to somebody else.
You got to pay me off now.
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go get his ticket. Check his ticket. Go get his ticket. Make sure. Go get him. Oh, I tried things like it doesn't matter. Are we okay, Judy? Fantastic. Congratulations. You can make the selection. And one more thing, Josh, come down here if you would.
Now I'm in trouble.
Not getting off easy. Folks, I told you when I introduced Josh, he does so much for us, and that a lot of it's pro bono, and you should go on his website and contribute from time to time if you're able to do so. Well, tonight, the Berks Oath Keepers are doing exactly that. I'm going to turn the mic over to their president and their secretary, is it? Treasurer.
Josh, on behalf of the Berks County Youth Keepers, and for the contribution to help you with to help stay the cost of your endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
It's $500. We voted unanimously to give this to Josh because he's fighting so hard for us. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Becky.
Berks Oath Keepers, and Joshua, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much. Folks, Linda is going to end our meeting in a prayer.
Lord, please watch over all of us as we go home and make us all safe and happy and have a great Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much. And we'll hope you're going to be back next month for our Christmas party. Amen.
Or you can make sure you do what was it, Sally said, get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and turn your scale back,